Have you ever been in a place that has become incredibly familiar to you, and you suddenly notice a detail about it that is pretty fundamental to it, but had gone completely unnoticed by you, and you just have this kind of existentially weird feeling of how did I never notice that before? That was my morning, and I kind of want to talk about it. Let me paint a picture for you. So earlier today, I was at the grocery store, the same grocery store that I have been going to for the last 8 years of my life. And I was in the checkout lane with my almost exactly the same thing that I buy every Friday. And I just glanced up and to the right. And so when you're at the checkout counter and you're looking out to the right, there's like the produce section, and then at the back, there's the like fish market area. And I glanced above the fish market, and there's an office there. And I had never noticed, or even looked up in the 8 years that I have gone to this supermarket to realize that there was an office there. And that really got me to thinking. So the first obvious thing that sprung to mind was simply the question of how did I miss out on this important detail? How have I spent 8 years in this place and never noticed that there was a second floor office that has windows that are overlooking the grocery store floor? But then something kind of deeper happened, and that was the thought that that space that I did not know existed has not only existed, but it is so fundamentally familiar to other people that it is their workspace, right? So in the same way that I have spent 8 years going to Whole Foods, being completely oblivious to the presence of this place, there are other people for whom that is their office, that they go to it on a daily basis, that its presence in that location is so fundamental to their existence. In a way, it reminded me of something that we talked about in the last video, which was this idea of us valuing complete pictures. And this kind of brought me to a conclusion about exactly the opposite of that. And what I mean is that in a way, we value a complete picture of the things that we are seeing, but also as humans have a strange comfort with not knowing the things that are just beyond the frame. Another way to think about that statement is if I think about televisions and movies, they are very deliberate about what is in frame and out of frame, right? The boom mic that's hanging up above is out of frame so that it doesn't ruin the immersion in the scene, right? They don't build the rocks that are 10 feet off of where they're shooting if they're doing like a mountain scene or something. They only set up the specific part of the frame that they are focused on. And our brains are really good at not extrapolating beyond the scene. Or I guess maybe it's better to say they are really good at extrapolating beyond the scene, but do that in a creative manner, not any other manner. So like to tie this back to my grocery store experience, I never looked up. So my frame was always produce section plus fish market. And I just extrapolated regular ceiling up above it, not office. And so that was an interesting realization for me. And it dovetailed with kind of a second aha weird moment that I had this week. So I'm going to try and tie the two together. So it was yesterday, I think, and I was accidentally taking a nap on my couch, as I sometimes do. And I had left some YouTube playing. And for those who aren't familiar, YouTube apps on the TV have a function where they will just kind of like keep the media rolling, right? They'll just autoplay the next video, whatever it happens to be. And so I had started tumbling down that YouTube rabbit hole of things that I would not hit play on, but YouTube is happy to play to a sleeping Alden. And the video that YouTube had selected was a video by a creator that I am consistently impressed and blown away by, and that is Michael from the channel Vsauce. He is a wordsmith. Everything he says is so deliberate and specifically chosen and clever and wordplay and well-researched, and just an amazing channel. And he was doing a video on perception of time and the illusions that surround it. I will link that down below. But what caught me was I woke up 20 minutes into this video in kind of like a hazy stupor. And he was talking about a term that was coined by a man named John Koenig called Sonder. And Sonder is a term that was coined as part of a series that John Koenig was doing called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And since then, I've kind of dug into a little bit, and it's super cool. It's basically an effort that happened, I guess, like 6 or 7 years ago to try to create a series of words that capture obscure but familiar feelings that humans experience and like codify them because there is no single word to capture them. And so one of these words that was coined as part of that was Sonder. And Sonder is defined as the realization that the passersby, the extras in our life, lead as rich and as vibrant lives as we do, that their experiences and feelings are as important to them as ours are to us. And this resonated with me, and it tied back so well to the grocery store experience that I had, because I had that moment where I said, oh my gosh, there are other people for whom this place is profoundly meaningful. It is their place of work. And I had completely been oblivious to it for 8 years of wandering through that grocery store. And to me, that's fascinating. The idea that there is now kind of like a, I guess, colloquially coined term Sonder to describe this experience. And the opposite of it, as described by Michael from Vsauce and John Koenig, is protagonist syndrome, right? It is the idea that, in a way, I think we all begin our existences and kind of move through life with the perspective that we are the protagonist of our life, right? That the world revolves around us, and then there are inner circles of people that expand to outer circles of people that expand to people that we will never meet, so on and so forth. But that somehow our uniqueness is tangibly different, and we are somehow unique and important. And I think that there is some truth to that reality, right? I do think that we are, and need to be for evolutionary reasons and other things, the protagonist of our lives. But I also really resonate with the idea that there is a huge amount of wonderment and appreciation to be derived from the idea that every life that crisscrosses may only cross for a moment, but in crossing, two equally rich and full of detail lives have intersected, right? I think that's a beautiful concept that also was explored a bit in, I want to say it was that 1990s movie Sliding Doors that kind of played with this idea of telling two narratives that only kind of briefly overlap. So, as I often do, I started thinking a bit about turning this mirror back on myself and thinking about the ways in which I can learn something or experience something differently in my own life by thinking about this. And the thing that sprung to mind is the time that I am spending on Twitch. So I've talked about this a few times, but I am live streaming me playing video games on Twitch about 20 hours a week. And One of the facets of that has been particularly interesting is the people that I have encountered that have come to watch me do what it is I am doing. And one of the first times that I kind of had a moment where I was like, oh, interesting, was one of my first followers, actually. So I was streaming a game, this person had a particular interest in it, and they showed up. And they started chatting with me about the game. And, it was kind of nice to have someone to interact with. And I started to ask them a few questions about themselves. And I found out that they are an insomniac that lives in Sweden. Go figure. And that was in and of itself kind of a fascinating moment, because going back to our discussion about electronic communication, I was filling in the dots, connecting the dots, coloring the picture, whatever, this person. And they were so wildly different than what I imagined. There is no world in which I would have assumed that this person was awake at 4 a.m. watching me play video games from Sweden. Weird. And so in thinking about that, and now thinking about this idea of Sonder dispelling the notion of the protagonist syndrome, it's really, really cool to think about the opportunity for our lives to intersect with people and all of the things that those people have to offer. Because I know from my own life how much there is, right? Like even just this YouTube channel is just a tiny fraction of the experiences I have, the things I think about, etc. And the fact that there are so many people in this world having and experiencing a similar myriad of experiences, for lack of a better word, is really exciting and humbling. And I think that there is something to be learned, or at least something to be appreciated, in the way in which the world is far more complex than we can ever perceive. Right? I think that neurologically, the world has been far too complex for a long time. This is not a new affectation. And many of the survival strategies that we have are around boiling down that complexity into digestible, generalized kinds of nuggets that our brain can wrap itself around and retain and hang on to. And in doing that boiling down, we are, in some cases, ignoring things like offices above fish markets. And in other cases, we are removing that detail because it is not cogent or critical to us functioning in the way that we need to function. But in either case, it boils down to perception again, right? And I think this is something that I have been thinking a lot about lately, is the role and effect that perception has on our existence. And it seems to me that our perception is the only gateway that we have into the world. And it is so deeply and profoundly flawed. And the human experience is so much about reconciling our flawed perception against these moments of bumping into ground truth. And I think that's what happened to me at the grocery store today. I had a moment of bumping into a reality and a ground truth that I had been totally oblivious of. And in standing in line, realizing that there was a thing that I did not know existed, I came face to face with my own flawed perception of the world and realized that I am not the protagonist of anything but my own perception. And I thought that was very interesting. So with that, thank you as always for watching. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Not apotamus. Ponderous.